Okay, today I'm going to show you something terrible. I'm going to walk you through the portfolio that I used to apply to graduate architecture school as a non-background, non-traditional student. First, a little bit about me and why I want to make this video. Why am I considered a non-background student? I have a BFA in painting that I received in 2014, and when I graduated, I never thought twice about continuing my education. I went right into a long-term studio program where I just spent that time focusing on developing my own work and applying for public art calls, which I'm not upset about. It led to a really fulfilling career and eventually architecture school. Second, I'm a non-traditional student, and I'm a non-traditional student for two reasons. The first being is that my parents didn't go to college or completed very little. So when I was applying to college in high school and taking standardized tests, they had no idea what to do with me. And so they just carried on and supported me in this big adventure and set an amazing example of how far reading every day and being a self-starter can get you. And without those two things, I wouldn't be where I am today. So my parents, yes, but also I'm a non-traditional student because I'm married. When I first began school, my husband and I had just celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary. And that is a lot. When I made the decision to go to grad school, it wouldn't just disrupt my life, but it would transform the life that we had built together. So all that being said, when I decided to apply to architecture school and began looking at the requirements, I realized I had never put together a portfolio. Sure, some work samples and maybe some galleries for exhibitions, but putting together a concise visual narrative of my work, I had never done that. And I didn't know what it would look like for someone like me and the work that I've been making. So I did what any young, enterprising, aspiring architecture student would do. I turned to Google, YouTube, and Pinterest. And that wasn't necessarily encouraging. Template after template, video after video. It was just the same, very bland, capital A architecture, black and white axonometrics, all the stuff that we see and yes, like might look good on the surface, but I didn't see myself in it. I didn't know how to apply that still to my work. So yes, I got a little bit more comfortable and beginning to lay out my work and knowing where things went on the page, but it really didn't show me how I could think about my individual art pieces as full-blown projects from beginning to end. So here's the video that I wish I could have watched when I was preparing to apply to graduate architecture school. The format of the video will be as follows. First, I will kind of give you a very quick overview of my portfolio, the chapters, why I included each project, and how I began to lay things out, and my process and how I did that. I didn't just immediately jump into the computer, so we can get to talk about that. Second, I will very quickly detail out how I would edit down or minimize some of the graphic design errors that I think detracted from my work in the portfolio. Third, I will give you a few tips and tricks that I've picked up over the last couple of years as I've put together my second year portfolio and put together work samples that I use to apply to internships. Let's jump right in. Okay, so part one, the format. As you can see, this is my cover. At the time, I made these very bright, vibrant, colorful washi tape drawings, and I used a diptych to bookend my portfolio. So one part of the drawing is on the front and the other part is on the back. At the time, I thought that was a really concise way of representing my work at the time, which was colorful and geometric. So opening to the second page, I created a table of contents that listed out all 8 of my projects, which might seem a little bit long if you're looking at other portfolios, which tend to include 4 to 5. However, the projects were art pieces, and so they maybe only consist of 2 to 3 spreads of just detailing out the photos and the process. It wasn't really a way to describe how I made everything. It was a very efficient way of creating a strong visual image at either ends of my portfolio. So the longer projects here will be in the middle. Also, I did not organize my projects chronologically. I depended on the visual impact of my work to create a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you'll see that as we flip through the projects in the beginning hinge on the middle project, and the projects at the end kind of lead up to that middle project. And you'll see that the work that I was making towards the beginning and towards the end are vastly different, but they share big overarching themes. This is chapter 1. I titled it the name of the exhibition, which is called Seeing Double, which was 9 sculptures total. And within the opening page of each chapter, I included just a few bullet points below the title: objective, date, project, and outcome. So the reader could very quickly look at what they were about to flip through. And so for me, this was a very easy way to distinguish between projects that were public art calls, commissions, and then self-directed work, which all look vastly different because the client is different. So I think this was a way that I began to kind of categorize my work in a way that maybe architects do, and that was okay. I also, in the exhibition work, include this 9 square grid template where I'm looking through different iterations of shape and color, and then at the bottom is maybe a construction detail or how like the sequence moves from drawing to in process. And then on the right tends to be the finished piece. And then it would flip open to either 2 more gallery style spreads or an overall comprehensive photo of the entire exhibition. So here are 6 of the 9 sculptures that were then exhibited in a restaurant. What I also noticed in architecture portfolios that I didn't quite have or was prepared to have are these project statements. And so what I did instead is I adapted my own personal artist statements or the statement written for the exhibition catalog for the portfolios. So I tried to pinpoint a few sentences that I thought very quickly summed up what the work was about and what I hoped to achieve, that I then re-summarized and edited for those beginning sentences at each chapter. So the chapters either started out with completed work, or for this chapter titled Lemon, which was kind of this ongoing research process for a long time, I decided to include drawings and writings from my sketchbook. And for me, that was to show that this was a self-developed project that came out of a place of my own interest. I then used that left page template again to show some of these in progress drawings. And then on the right is a full-size sculpture that then opens up to a gallery. And then we see another completed work as well as the work in its full series, as well as the artist statement again on the bottom of the page. So these 3 beginning chapters for me felt like the strongest foot forward that I can put in my portfolio. The images are very captivating. They're bright. They're colorful. It shows that I work not only through color and shape, but I'm also very aware of composition of my work. So the way that things begin to share this language of diagonals and these threshold shapes is really important to me to carry on through the end of my portfolio. So it's like the exhibition work gets out of the way, and then this chapter focuses on a self-initiated project that I did in the town that I was living before attending grad school. This chapter is just that process and some of the models that I made and how I made it in my studio. But it ends with this overall view and a detail shot. So as you can see, these chapters are quite short and they're not exactly in chronological order. But here is what I call the hinge point in my portfolio. All the projects that come before this chapter depended on this project, and everything that comes after this chapter leads up to this project. So this is, I guess, what you would consider how the tide turned in my career and in my work. So this chapter represents when architecture moves to the forefront of my practice. It was a language that I definitely adapted and appropriated at times, but it was here and in this 2-year period of this chapter where I really began to embrace the language of my work, collaborate, and really have these discussions about shifts in scale and what my work would look like in the urban environment. So the layout tends to be a bit messier in this chapter, and that's just because I think I was trying to include so much information. But like the previous chapters, it moves from some in-progress work to images of the construction, and then finally the final project and how that exists on site and in context. So here it was important for me to include this project not only because it felt like my biggest accomplishment, but also because it began to speak about my work in this urban context, which is still incredibly important to me today. Another important thing about being an artist is that you never stop learning. So my husband and I, although we were both sculptors and practicing at the time, we always were looking for new opportunities to grow our skills and our abilities. So we sometimes would apply to grants to attend woodworking classes. And this is one of those grants that I was awarded to take a class at the Mark Adams School of Woodworking taught by a Red Seal journeyman who really taught an amazing class on architectural model making. And in that class, I actually made this Germanic rooftop structure through the technical stereotomical drawing process where you layer different views of the rooftop on top of one another, hand drawn, and you use that as a way to cut the joinery. So this is included in my portfolio because it's a way for me to show that the way that I'm building my work is definitely intentional and it's not just something that I hide under the paint. I'm thinking about the way that these components come together. And so it's the class portion of this chapter and then also my artistic response where I then began to build these life-size installations that use the same techniques learned from the class. So it's the way that I took the classwork and then began to apply it to transform my drawings into these three-dimensional shapes. The second to last chapter is some of my early mapping work, and I included it because I felt like it was important to show how architecture became accessible to me, and it became accessible through the idea of mapping and through collage. So early in my practice, I was making these large-scale CNC cutout shape installation wall hanging things, and they were really fun because they were my first explorations of color, and then I could make them wrap around walls and change perspectives and really impact the viewer of the room. So this was included because it's showing that right off the bat from undergrad, I am immediately thinking about the way that my work can transform space and impact the viewer and the body. So it's like I'm working on these varying scales of shape and color. Yes, sure, but I'm also thinking about the person, which then actually the third to last project. But this leads to the next project where it began with the map, but it became these three-dimensional abstractions of buildings. And this project pushed me to do something interactive. So the transition between these two chapters is, yes, my work can exist on the wall, but I also have these big ambitions to make interactive installations that have impact on community spaces. But sometimes you don't always get to make that work, and that's why I included this chapter and where my little subtitles under the chapter name come in handy, because this was a commission that I still got to pursue my CNC work, but I just did it in a different setting, in a very corporate interior setting for a skywalk in Kansas City, where they wanted a whitewashed minimal design, but I still asked if I could think about the interior edges. And that was a really amazing design move because this piece was placed adjacent to an escalator. So as viewers came up the escalator, the colors on the inside edges shifted as they ascended towards the top. Okay, so that's it. Here's my end page with the other part of that opening diptych centered on the page with a thank you. Short, sweet, simple, to the point, no contact information. They already have that. I just wanted it to be very complimentary to the front. So part 2. what would I have done differently? First, just looking at my cover page and my table of contents, the text should just all be black. The color of my name and the selected works, yes, it seems fun, but it shouldn't really be about trying to decipher what it says. My eye just kind of bounces around the page, which can be somewhat uncomfortable, especially as you move into the table of contents. The goal of your portfolio and your graphic design strategy should be to make the work feel as seamless as possible, moving from one page to the next. This also means that you are making or helping guiding your readers from left to right, not left, down, up, around. That's not the way that we read. So there's another graphic design no that I don't like that I did consistently throughout my portfolio. What was I thinking about the lines? I don't know. Here at the bottom above the page number on the master spread, I had a line element there. And then above the chapter name of each cover page, I would not include a line. Again, I would also make the text all black here. And on that note, it's not just the color of the text, it's the types of fonts that I'm using. I think there are probably 5 or 6 different font styles that I'm using when really it should just be a heading font, a subtitle font, and a caption body font. 3 sizes, 3 kinds. That's all you need. Secondly, about the template, I don't think that this organization reads as well as I would like it to read. I wish I gave these projects more space and the tape drawings more time to breathe on the page. They're all very fun and quirky in their own way, but those things really aren't highlighted when they're all jammed together on the left side of this page. So that's something to think about as you create these page sequences of how things, again, move from left to right and what you want to call attention to. The third thing that I want to talk about are these illustrator drawings on the left-hand side and this map drawing on the chapter page of this project. Before I started my portfolio, I had never opened Illustrator before. And quite frankly, that was another overwhelming task in and itself, in addition to creating a portfolio. And knowing who my audience is now and the types of graphic representation methods that I use in school, I really wish that I had left at least these diagrams alone. The way that I redrew them in Illustrator, taking so much time and energy, which I know it seems simple now, but I was so overwhelmed. It really doesn't make sense and it doesn't read well, and I don't think it does the work justice. I really wish I would have focused on this bottom sequence. I just think I wanted it to match the previous chapter with the 6 tape drawings. So something to think about. If you feel like you're putting too much energy into redoing something and you're stressed over it, you probably are. Which brings me to this map where I went through several iterations of it and multiple types of feedback. I had never drawn a map before. And so this is also something that I spent way too much time in Illustrator trying to perfect. And I don't even think it makes sense. It's just not worth it. But I needed something to fill this space. So you need to also think about your portfolio in a way where you are highlighting exactly what you have and you're not trying to go too far out of your way to make something new, to make the project make sense, because trust me, it already makes sense. Your portfolio is only as strong as your weakest image, and I think it's things like this map or like these colorful Illustrator drawings that really detract from the work that I am trying to highlight in these chapters. Lastly, I want to call attention to spreads like these. There are a lot of collage style spreads and other architectural portfolios that I found online that I'm sure inspired something like this, but I really don't think a page like this tells a story, but that's okay. And not every spread is going to be perfect. So, in the last critique of my portfolio where it's like, don't try and make something to make it perfect. You have to understand that your readers, they're teachers. They know what you're trying to get across. They are smarter than you think. And while you don't need to, make them reach for certain conclusions, even though a page might not look as pretty or aesthetic as some portfolio pages, if it gets the point across, that's the purpose. And so don't stress over some pages that might feel cluttered or might not be as pretty or all the colors don't go together. It's just is what it is. So I look at the spread and I'm like, wow, I was trying to convey the work of an academic architecture office partnered with a graduate program and all of the work that they were producing. I was trying to show insight into my artistic responses to their work while also giving the timeline and the objectives of various phases of the project. And that is a lot to cover in just like 4 or 5 spreads. And so I would definitely, if I could go back, give this project probably 2 more spreads. Like there's just so much to read and so much to look at on each page. It's really overwhelming and I don't think it does the process justice. Great. Okay. Part 3, tips and tricks. So the thing that I wish I would have known most when making my portfolio last time are very simple graphic design layout tips that can really elevate the way that you're composing your portfolio. So number 1, how to turn the baseline on and set it so it's helpful for you. In this portfolio, I already have the baseline grid turned on, but you go to View, Guides and Grids, and if you don't already have them turned on, it should say Show Baseline Grid. So, or you can hit Control-Shift, comma, and that turns on a smaller grid for you, but you can still go to View, Guides and Grids, Show Baseline Grid. So here you see these now blue lines across your document that can help align your text. But how do you know how far apart they are? So what you want to go to next is Edit, Preferences, and you can pick your grids. And the first option that comes up is the ability to set your baseline grid. So right now mine is at every 12 points, which if I hit OK and I go into one of these text boxes, you'll see that over here, my property is that my line spacing is 12 points. So every text box that I have is now aligned to the baseline grid. It now is aligned to those light blue lines, making everything nice, neat, and orderly. The second thing that I would like to show you that also deals with the baseline grid is a way to use your cursor keys to move your text boxes. So in my portfolio example that I showed you, I had a lot of caption text with inconsistent spacing. That was something that I wanted to bring up in the previous part, but I thought it would be best to save that for this part. So I had a lot of captions, many of them unnecessary and unnecessarily bolded. We don't need that. But I had a really hard time placing the captions on the page. So something that I prefer to do now is to use my cursor keys. So what we can do is to go back to your preferences menu, and you can go to units and increments. And here under this category, there are keyboard increments where your cursor keyboard is set to a baseline shift of 2 points. So now every time I hit my down arrow key, it moves a text box 1/6 of my baseline grid. And so most of my captions in my current portfolios are 2 clicks down from the base of an image frame. And that for me has been really helpful and a really consistent way to constantly caption my images, which have white backgrounds, might not fill the entire frame, etc. But it just looks clean. The main point of all of this is to have your portfolio laid out in such a way where the text and the captions are secondary. You're creating a visual narrative for the viewer, not a book to read. I mean, we will read it, but read it through the sequence of images, not based on every single word that you have written. Lastly, something that I didn't know about but have very quickly adapted into using are paragraph styles in InDesign, and it would save a lot of time of clicking back and forth using the eyedropper tool and making sure that all of your text is exactly the same. I have pet peeves with unnecessarily hyphenated paragraphs, so this is a way for me to very quickly remove all of those necessary edits and just compile them into one step. So if we go over to your properties panel and this drop down link, you can click this plus sign here and it will add a paragraph style. And then you can use this edit button to then bring up this window where you can move through these left-hand tabs to format the text for your captions, for your headlines, for your subtitles, and for your body text. So if we want this to be a body paragraph style text, you can have it, derived from this basic paragraph, and then you can click through. So I want it to be my body text. I typically use Open Sans. Where are you? So we can set that up here. You can set it to have the 12-point, baseline grid so that all lines up. You can also move down and have it match anything that you have elsewhere in your portfolio. So, but my favorite thing is uncheck hyphenate so I don't ever have to think about it again. And but also if we're going to make a body paragraph, that should probably be 10 or 8-point font. And so that then goes through and it changes this to that setting. And then I can just go ahead and make a text box and maybe just fill with placeholder text. And then if I come in and highlight it, I can just set it to be my body paragraph. And it automatically formats it the way that you want, and you can do that consistently across every single page. So lastly, on that note of having things consistent across every single page, a really helpful thing to get used to using in InDesign are your master pages. So here, if you double click on the master page, it will bring you up to something that will apply itself to every single page. Some people have A and B master pages. I believe in this portfolio, I do have A and B that I use for my project pages because that is universal across each chapter. But what they're useful for are page numbers that you can insert here at the bottom, and that is just a right. You can create a text box, and then you right click and then insert special character and then insert marker and then, current page number, etc. So you can do that with a number of different things. And then on my title page, I just have it set to project name, the statement, description. And so when I come to a project page, it is that format. And then I right click on the page and then I override all parent page items. So the text and the placement is still there, but then I can go ahead and fill it with the content that I need. Okay, so I hope you found that both helpful and encouraging as you begin to craft your portfolio as a non-traditional, non-background applicant. I also hope that it just reiterated that architecture is an incredibly multidisciplinary practice, and there is no right or wrong way how people come to their career path. I myself barely made it through a bachelor's degree in painting, and I have found myself here. I also hope this video made InDesign a bit more approachable as you begin to learn the ins and outs of graphic design and the way that you're beginning to craft your narrative. If you have any further questions or would want to brainstorm ways to improve your portfolio, go ahead and drop a comment below. I truly wish you the best of luck in your application and your portfolio process. I know that this can be a difficult time but it is almost over. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.